Now, in a boost for China, its currency surpassed the US dollar for the first time this week. The tensions with the West has pushed Russian economy closer to China, and according to data, on Monday, a total of 64,900 Yuan ruble transactions were completed, with the volume of trading reaching over $1 billion.
It's the end of an era. For decades, the US dollar has dominated world markets as the primary reserve currency, but now there are whispers that a new challenger is emerging. One that could dethrone the dollar and become the new king of the currency world. That challenger is the Chinese yuan, and it's gaining momentum with each passing day. As tension builds and speculation runs rampant, the fate of global markets hangs in the balance. Will the yuan overtake the dollar? And what will that mean for the global economy? Join us as we delve into this monumental shift and explore the dramatic impact it could have on the world as we know it. The Chinese yuan has been gaining traction in the global economy, and many experts are predicting that it could overtake the US dollar as the world's primary reserve currency. In this video, we will discuss how this could happen and what it would mean for the global economy. First of all, let's look at why the US dollar is currently so dominant. The US dollar is a stable currency with no history of devaluation. This makes it attractive to countries who want to store their reserves in a safe currency. It also means that international transactions are often conducted using US dollars, as it is seen as a reliable currency. However, there are some factors that suggest that the Chinese yuan could soon overtake the US dollar as the world's primary reserve currency. China has been taking steps to increase its presence in global markets, and its economy is growing rapidly. This means that more countries are likely to start using the yuan for international transactions and storing their reserves in it. In addition, the International Monetary Fund, IMF, recently designated the yuan as a reserve currency, which gives it more credibility on an international level. This could make countries more willing to use it for their international transactions and store their reserves in it instead of the US dollar. Finally, China has been pushing for its oil sales to be priced in yuan rather than US dollars. If this happens, then other countries may follow suit and start pricing their oil sales in yuan too. This would give a huge boost to its status as an international reserve currency and could lead to its eventual dominance over the US dollar. The US dollar's reign as the world's reserve currency is being threatened due to a variety of factors. One of the most prominent is the emergence of digital currencies, such as Bitcoin, which have seen rapid growth in recent years. This has led to increased speculation and investment in these currencies, leading to a decrease in demand for the US dollar. Additionally, America's aggressive use of sanctions has also caused some countries to look for alternatives to the US dollar, further undermining its status as the world's reserve currency. Finally, other countries are developing their own currency projects that could challenge the US dollar's dominance in global trade. All of these factors have combined to create an environment where the US dollar's reign is increasingly under threat. If the Chinese yuan becomes the world's primary reserve currency, this would have significant implications for global markets. Firstly, it would give China much greater influence over global financial markets and economic policies. This could lead to a shift in power dynamics between China, the US, and other countries in terms of economic and geopolitical influence. Secondly, it would mean that more countries would start using the yuan for international transactions and storing their reserves in it, which would boost China's economy and help establish it as a major player on the global stage. Finally, it could lead to a significant devaluation of the US dollar, which would have far-reaching consequences for the global economy. However, it's important to note that the Chinese yuan will need to address several key challenges in order to become a dominant reserve currency. These include issues with transparency, convertibility, and governance. Even so, there is no doubt that the rise of the Chinese yuan represents a significant development in the global economic landscape, and one which will be worth monitoring closely in the years to come. If the Chinese yuan becomes the world's primary reserve currency, there would be several implications for the global economy. Here are some major potential implications. Greater influence of China. If the yuan becomes the primary reserve currency, China would become a dominant player in global finance and economic policies. This would allow the country to exert more influence over international financial markets, which could lead to shifting power dynamics on the global stage. Changing trading patterns. With the rise of the yuan, more countries would start using it for international trade and storing their reserves in it. This would mean that the demand for US dollars would decrease, which could lead to a significant devaluation of the US dollar. Boost to China's economy. The yuan's rise as the primary reserve currency would likely lead to a significant boost in China's economy, since it would increase demand for the yuan and lead to an inflow of foreign investments. This would help China establish itself as a major financial and economic power worldwide. Increased pricing power. If China starts pricing its exports in yuan instead of US dollars, this would give the country greater control over commodity prices worldwide. This would allow China to have more pricing power over the goods and commodities it produces. Need for transparency. For the yuan to become the world's primary reserve currency, China would need to address issues around transparency and governance. It would need to ensure that the market for the yuan is transparent and fair, which would help establish trust in the currency on a global level. If the yuan becomes the world's primary reserve currency, it would represent a significant shift in the global economic landscape. While there are challenges that would need to be addressed, there are certainly many potential benefits to this development, and it would be worth monitoring closely over the coming years. The US dollar is at some risk of devaluation, particularly if the Chinese yuan becomes the world's primary reserve currency. This would lead to decreased demand for the US dollar and could cause a drop in its value relative to other currencies. Additionally, factors such as inflation and government debt could also contribute to a devaluation of the US dollar. However, it is important to note that the US dollar is still a very stable currency with a strong history of stability and reliability, which means that any devaluation is likely to occur gradually over time, rather than suddenly. Ultimately, the future of the US dollar depends on a variety of economic and political factors, and it is impossible to predict with certainty what will happen in the coming years. The outlook for the US dollar is uncertain. After a historic bull run in 2022, the nominal broad dollar index fell almost 7% between November 2022 and January 2023. This suggests that the US dollar may be losing its strength as other currencies gain ground. The Federal Reserve expects rates to peak at 4.5% to 4.75% in 2023, according to their own projections. This could lead to further weakening of the US dollar against other major currencies, such as the euro and pound sterling. In addition, global growth is showing signs of buoyancy, and macro and inflation uncertainty are waning, leading some analysts to predict a drop of up to 15% in the value of the US dollar by the end of 2023. This could be compounded by weak labor data from the United States, which could further weaken its currency relative to other countries. Overall, it appears that there is potential for further weakening of the US dollar in 2023 as other currencies gain ground and economic conditions shift globally. It is difficult to predict with certainty whether China will take over the US in terms of currency dominance. While the Chinese yuan has been gaining traction in global markets in recent years, the US dollar is still the dominant currency for international trade and as a reserve currency. Additionally, there are many challenges that China would need to address in order to establish the yuan as the world's primary reserve currency, including issues around transparency, convertibility, and governance. However, if China is able to continue its economic growth and address these challenges effectively, it is possible that the yuan could eventually overtake the US dollar as the world's primary reserve currency. If this were to happen, it could lead to a significant shift in the global economic landscape and power dynamics. It is worth noting, however, that this is a long-term trend and would take years to fully materialize. With many unforeseen developments and challenges along the way, the Chinese yuan is becoming increasingly popular as the global currency, with its value steadily increasing against the US dollar. This trend has been seen in recent years, with the USD and CNY exchange rate dropping from 6.3575 in April 2020 to 6.880 in April 2023. The shift is due to several factors, including China's growing economic power and the increasing use of the yuan as an international currency for trade and investment. Additionally, China has been actively promoting the use of its currency through initiatives such as the Belt and Road Initiative and other international agreements. These developments have led to increased demand for the yuan, resulting in a strengthening of its value compared to other currencies such as the US dollar. As this trend continues, it is likely that we will see more countries turning to the Chinese yuan as their primary currency for international transactions. While the yuan is undoubtedly gaining momentum in international markets, it is too early to say whether it will replace the US dollar as the primary reserve currency. Only time will tell how this dynamic unfolds in the coming years. While there is still some way to go before we see any major changes in terms of which currency dominates global markets, there are signs that suggest that we could see a shift from US dollar dominance towards Chinese yuan dominance over time. It will be interesting to see how things develop over the coming year.